Diana Torres, a quiet housewife, shocked everyone when she left her controlling husband after 30 years. But what she secretly discovered about her grandmother's house will leave you speechless. Before we dive into the story, let's do what Sleepless in Seattle taught us. Share where you're listening from. Comment below. Diana's coffee has grown cold again, untouched since she poured it an hour ago. Morning light filters through dusty Venetian blinds, casting thin stripes across the kitchen counter, where her grandmother's old china sits in neat rows, waiting to be put away. The house is quiet, except for the steady tick of the antique wall clock, the one her grandmother wound every Sunday after church, its brass pendulum marking time even in frozen moments like these. She cradles the mug anyway, its familiar weight anchoring her to the present as she moves through the kitchen in her well-practiced routine. The coffee maker gurgles as it brews a fresh pot, this one for Luis, and he likes his coffee scalding hot with exactly one sugar cube. Any variation from this routine earns her that look, the one that makes her feel small, incompetent, like a child who can't follow simple instructions. Diana wipes down the counter for the third time, though it's already spotless. Her movements are mechanical, automated after decades of the same morning dance. The kitchen, with its worn linoleum floors and dated wallpaper, feels both like a sanctuary and a prison. Every corner holds memories. Her grandmother teaching her to make tamales, Sunday family dinners that stretched late into the evening, the quiet moments alone when she could just breathe. Now those memories feel distant, like photographs faded by too much sun. The stairs creak overhead. Luis is awake. Diana straightens unconsciously, checking her reflection in the window above the sink. At 53, she still looks presentable, though the years have left their mark in the silver threading through her dark hair, the fine lines around her eyes. Luis has opinions about how a wife should look, even first thing in the morning. The coffee better be fresh, Luis calls down, his voice carrying that edge she's learned to recognize. Yesterday's was barely warm. Diana pours his coffee quickly when arranging everything on the small tray. The china cup, never a mug, the sugar cube on its delicate silver spoon, 2 pieces of wheat toast cut diagonally, never straight across. Her hands move with practiced precision, careful not to spill a drop. Just finished brewing, she answers, keeping her voice light, pleasant. Luis enters the kitchen like he owns it, which Diana supposes he does now. Everything is in his name these days. He's dressed for work already, and his suit pressed crisp, his salt and pepper hair perfectly combed. He doesn't acknowledge her as he takes his seat at the head of the table, opening his tablet to check the morning news. "Your sister called yesterday," Diana ventures, setting his breakfast before him. "She wanted to know if we're still coming for dinner on Sunday." Luis grunts, not looking up. "The coffee's too dark again. How many times do I have to tell you? And these socks." He holds up one foot, showing where the elastic has started to wear. "I told you to replace them last week." "I'll pick up new ones today," Diana says quickly, already moving to pour fresh coffee. The old cup joins her own in the sink, both destined to be washed and put away without ever serving their purpose. "And I'll make the coffee lighter tomorrow." "See that you do?" Luis takes a bite of toast, frowning slightly. "About Sunday, tell Amelia we'll be there. She and I have some business to discuss anyway." Something in his tone makes Diana's stomach tighten, but she knows better than to ask questions. Instead, she busies herself with the dishes, letting the running water fill the silence. Through the kitchen window, she can see Mrs. Rodriguez next door tending her roses, already dressed for her morning walk. Once, Diana would have joined her, but Luis doesn't approve of gossiping with the neighbors so early in the day. Better to stay inside, he says, where there's work to be done. After Luis leaves for work, Diana moves through her daily routine like a ghost in her own home. Each task is precise, measured, perfect. Laundry, sorted by color and fabric type, floors swept until they gleam, windows cleaned until they're invisible. The routine is both comforting and suffocating, a prison built of familiar habits. The phone rings around noon. Maria, one of the few friends she's managed to keep in touch with over the years. Diana lets it go to voicemail, knowing Luis checks the call log. She'll listen to the message later when she can be sure of privacy. In the laundry room, she sorts clothes methodically. Luis's work shirts, always starched, His socks, failing elastic, carefully noted, her own modest wardrobe relegated to the bottom of the basket. A receipt falls from one of his pockets, dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown, dated last week. She hadn't known he'd eaten there. These days, she knows less and less about his movements, his decisions. The washing machine's rhythm becomes a backdrop to her thoughts as Diana moves upstairs to make the beds. In their bedroom, Luis's presence looms large despite his absence. His clothes fill the closet, while hers are compressed into a small section on the left. His reading glasses lie on the nightstand next to a book she's never seen him open. Even the air feels heavy with his cologne, expensive and overwhelming. The afternoon brings more tasks: ironing Luis's shirts for the week ahead, planning meals that won't upset his sensitive stomach, calling the gutter cleaning service, but only after carefully researching prices to avoid Luis's accusations of wastefulness. Each action is a small piece in the mosaic of her contained life. When the phone rings again, it's Emilia, Luis's sister. Diana answers quickly, knowing Luis checks the missed calls. Hello? Diana. Querida. Emilia's voice drips with false warmth. Luis tells me you're coming on Sunday. Wonderful. I'm making my special paella, the one Luis loves so much. Yes, we'll be there. Diana cradles the phone between ear and shoulder as she continues folding laundry. Can I bring anything? Oh no need. Just bring yourself. Emilia pauses, and Diana can hear the smile in her voice, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Actually, Luis and I have been talking about the house, your grandmother's house. We have some ideas we'd like to discuss. Diana's hands still on a half-folded shirt. The house? Yes, you know how these old places are. So much maintenance, so many memories. Sometimes it's better to let go, start fresh. But we'll talk more on Sunday. Hasta luego, querida. The line goes dead before Diana can respond. She stares at the phone, then at her hands, which have begun to tremble. The house. They want to talk about the house. Her grandmother's words echo in her mind. Keep its stories safe. That evening, Luis arrives home later than usual, his movements sharp with irritation. Diana serves his dinner in careful silence, watching him from the corner of her eye. He barely touches the food, focused instead on his phone, texting rapidly. The Real Estate Association called today, he announces suddenly, making her jump. They're interested in properties in this area. Good timing, wouldn't you say? Diana's hand trembles as she sets down the serving spoon. Properties? Luis doesn't look up from his phone. The market's hot right now. Emilia has some contacts who think this house could fetch a good price once it's properly renovated. The words hit Diana like physical blows. She grips the edge of the counter, steadying herself. Renovated? Well, we can't sell it looking like this, can we? Luis gestures vaguely at the kitchen, at her grandmother's careful decorating, at the life built into every corner. It needs updating, modernizing. Emilia knows people who can handle all that. Diana stares at the wall above his head, at the small crack in the plaster she's never been able to repair properly. Her voice comes from far away. Sell it? We'll discuss everything on Sunday. Luis stands, straightening his tie. Don't get emotional about it. It's just business. But it isn't just business. This house is her history, her inheritance, her last connection to a time when she felt like more than just Luis's wife. Diana watches him head to his study, her mind racing with implications. They're going to sell her grandmother's house. They're going to erase every trace of the women who lived here before, who made this place a home. That night, while Luis watches his evening news, Diana moves through the house with quiet purpose. She knows his routine. News until 9, then paperwork, then bed by 10:30. Never earlier, never later. The predictability that once felt suffocating now gives her an advantage. Her eyes catch on something metallic on Luis's dresser, his keys. Including, she realizes with a jolt, the key to his study drawer. Luis never leaves them out. Never. But today he changed clothes after work, distracted by a phone call from Emilia, a small oversight, a crucial detail. Diana's heart pounds as she stares at the keys. Each one represents a locked part of her life, a barrier Luis created to keep her contained. When she hears him leave his study for more coffee, she seizes her chance. The study smells of his cologne and old paper, a suffocating combination. Diana moves quickly to his desk, finding the drawer where he keeps important documents. The key slides in smoothly, turns without sound. Inside, folders are arranged with obsessive precision. Her fingers rifle through tabs, taxes, investments, property. There, a folder labeled Torres Estate. Diana pulls it out with trembling hands, opens it under the desk lamp. Her grandmother's familiar signature jumps out from the first page, bold and clear. Diana scans the document, heart racing. Words leap out: sole heir, complete ownership, unconditional transfer. She reads it again, understanding blooming like dawn. The house is still hers, legally, completely hers. She never signed it away. Luis couldn't transfer ownership without her consent. All his talk of selling, of Amelia's plans, they have no right, no power. Footsteps in the hallway snap her back to the present. Diana quickly replaces the folder, locks the drawer. She's barely cleared the doorway when Luis returns, coffee in hand. "What are you doing down here?" His voice carries that dangerous edge. "I thought I heard the phone." Diana keeps her voice steady, though her heart threatens to burst. Wrong number. Luis stares at her for a long moment, eyes narrowed. "Go to bed. I have work to finish." Diana nods, turning away before he can see the truth in her face. Each step up the stairs feels different now, lighter. Behind her, Luis's study door closes with a decisive click. In their bedroom, Deanna goes through the motions of preparing for bed. She changes into her nightgown, applies her night cream, turns down the covers. But inside, something fundamental has shifted. The woman in the mirror looks back at her with new eyes, steady and sure. She thinks about Sunday dinner at Amelia's, about the plans they've made for her home, her inheritance, her life. They expect her to sit quietly, to nod and smile, to sign away her grandmother's legacy without protest. Diana slips between the cool sheets, listening to Luis moving around downstairs. For the first time in years, she doesn't feel fear at the sound of his footsteps. Instead, she feels something else growing in her chest: determination, purpose, strength. Outside, the moon rises over her grandmother's house, casting silver light through the windows. Diana watches it climb higher, remembering all the women who lived here before her, who faced their own battles, who found their own strength. "Keep its stories safe," her grandmother had said. Not just the house's stories, Diana realizes now, but her own. The story of a woman who lost herself in fear and silence, but who found her way back to strength. Who remembered, finally, that she comes from a line of women who don't surrender their homes, their hearts, or their power to men who would diminish them. Luis's heavy tread on the stairs doesn't make her flinch tonight. Diana closes her eyes, feigning sleep as he enters the room. Let him think she's the same submissive wife she was this morning. Let him believe nothing has changed. But everything has changed. In the darkness, Diana's hand curls around her grandmother's wedding ring, worn on a chain beneath her nightgown. Its edges press into her palm, grounding her in this moment of decision. She thinks of the documents in Luis's study, of Amelia's smug plans, of Sunday dinner looming ahead. They want to erase her from her own home, to write her out of her own story. But Diana isn't finished writing yet. This chapter might be ending. The chapter of silence, of submission, of slow erasure. But another one is beginning. Her grandmother's voice echoes in her memory, strong and clear. This house has sheltered 4 generations of strong women. Diana opens her eyes to the moonlit room, to the home that holds her history, to the future suddenly wide open before her. It's time to be the strong woman her grandmother always knew she could be. Diana's fingers hover over the cafe's business card, tracing its embossed letters while her other hand grips her morning coffee. The familiar weight of the mug grounds her, though her stomach churns with equal parts anticipation and dread. Through the kitchen window, morning light catches on the brass pendulum of her grandmother's clock, its steady swing marking time like a metronome, tick, 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 counting down the moments until she must act. The business card had appeared like a sign from above, caught in the edge of Mrs. Rodriguez's rose bushes during Diana's morning routine of straightening the flower beds. Cafe Rosa, it reads in elegant script, now hiring. She'd slipped it into her pocket before Luis could spot it through the window, before he could question why she was lingering too long in the garden again. Diana rises from the kitchen table, her movements careful and practiced. The house creaks around her, familiar sounds that once brought comfort but now feel like warnings. She checks her reflection in the window above the sink, hair neatly combed, clothes presentable but not too noticeable. Luis has opinions about how a wife should dress, even when running errands. I'm going to the grocery store, she calls up the stairs, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. We're low on coffee. Luis's grunt of acknowledgement drifts down from his study. Don't forget my particular brand this time, and be back before lunch. Amelia might stop by. Diana's hand tightens on her purse strap. Of course. The lie tastes bitter on her tongue, but she swallows it down with years of practice. She's become an expert at these small deceptions, these tiny acts of rebellion that Luis never notices. The bus ride to downtown feels both endless and too short. Diana watches familiar landmarks slide past the window. The park where she used to take long walks before Luis decided it wasn't safe. The library where she'd spent countless hours until Luis complained about the time wasted on books. Each site marks another freedom lost, another piece of herself slowly chipped away over the years. Cafe Rosa sits on a quiet corner, its red awning bright against weathered brick. Through the window, Diana catches glimpses of comfortable chairs, warm lighting, the kind of place where people linger over conversations and second cups of coffee. Her grandmother would have loved it. The bell above the door chimes as Diana enters, and the rich scent of coffee wraps around her like an embrace. Behind the counter, a woman about her age looks up with a warm smile. Her name tag reads Carla. Welcome to Cafe Rosa, Carla says, her voice carrying the same warmth as her smile. What can I get for you today? Diana's rehearsed speech catches in her throat. She's spent the entire bus ride practicing these words, but now they seem to evaporate in the face of reality. Her fingers find the business card in her pocket, drawing strength from its edges. I saw that you're hiring, she manages finally, pulling out the card. I was wondering if you might still need help? Carla's smile widens. We certainly do. Have you worked in a cafe before? No, but I'm a quick learner. Diana straightens her shoulders slightly, channeling some of her grandmother's strength. I make excellent coffee, and I'm good with people. When can you start? The question catches Diana off guard. She'd expected more resistance, more questions about her age or experience. I could work afternoons while my husband is at work, just a few hours a week. Carla nods, understanding flickering in her eyes. We can work with that. Why don't you come back tomorrow? We'll get the paperwork sorted, and I can show you the ropes. As Diana leaves the cafe, her steps feel lighter than they have in years. The exhilaration of taking this first small step toward independence mingles with fear. Fear of discovery, fear of consequences, fear of change. But beneath it all runs a current of something she hasn't felt in decades. Hope. The next few weeks pass in a blur of secret afternoon shifts and carefully constructed lies. Diana tells Luis she's joined a church group that meets 3 afternoons a week. He approves, thinking it will keep her occupied with appropriate activities. Each lie adds another weight to her conscience, but each paycheck tucked away in her secret account feels like another key to a locked door. It's during one of these afternoon shifts that Diana spots the electronics store across the street, its window display advertising the latest smartphones. Her current phone, the one Luis insisted on buying, the one he regularly checks, feels heavy in her pocket. A second phone, one he doesn't know about, could be her lifeline to the outside world. After her shift ends, Diana crosses the street with purpose. The store's fluorescent lights feel harsh after the warm glow of the cafe, but she forces herself to stand tall as she approaches the counter. The young sales associate doesn't bat an eye as Diana selects a simple model with strong privacy features. Will you be transferring your number? He asks, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Diana shakes her head. No, I need a new line. Her voice sounds stronger than she feels. Later that night, after Luis has retreated to his study, Diana sits on the edge of their bed, the new phone hidden in her palm. Her fingers shake slightly as she programs in the numbers she's memorized over the years. Friends Luis gradually pushed away, family members who stopped calling after one too many uncomfortable conversations. The phone disappears into the false bottom of her jewelry box, another secret to carry. But this secret feels different from the others. This one tastes like freedom. Days blur together in a pattern of careful deception. Diana moves through her usual routines, making Luis's coffee exactly as he likes it, keeping the house spotless, playing the role of the perfect wife, while building her separate life in stolen moments. Her cafe shifts become an anchor, a space where she exists as herself rather than as Luis's wife. But Luis isn't blind to the changes. One evening, as Diana serves his dinner, steak medium rare, exactly 6 minutes on each side, he looks up from his plate with narrowed eyes. "You seem different lately," he says, his voice carrying that dangerous edge she's learned to fear. "Distracted." Diana keeps her hands steady as she refills his water glass. "Different how? You're gone more often. Always these church meetings." He spears a piece of meat with precise movements. "Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned she hasn't seen you at morning prayer group lately." Ice slides down Diana's spine. She should have known he'd check up on her church attendance. "I switched to the afternoon group," she says, the lie coming smoothly now. "It works better with my schedule." "Your schedule?" Luis's laugh holds no humor. "What schedule? Your job is here, taking care of our home." Diana forces a smile, though her heart pounds against her ribs. "Of course. I just meant it's easier to get the housework done in the morning." Luis watches her for a long moment, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You've been talking to people, haven't you? Those friends of yours, the ones who always filled your head with nonsense." "No, Luis. I've just been tired lately." Diana begins clearing the plates, needing to move, to do something with her trembling hands. "Maybe I'm coming down with something." Luis stands, straightening his tie. "Make sure you're home tomorrow afternoon. Emilia's coming by to discuss the house renovations." Diana nearly drops the plates. "Renovations? Just some updates before we list it. Nothing for you to worry about." He heads toward his study, pausing in the doorway. "And Diana, no more afternoon church meetings. I think they're becoming a distraction." The plates clatter slightly as Diana sets them in the sink. She grips the counter's edge, forcing air into her lungs. Luis's words echo in her head, "Before we list it." They're moving faster than she expected. That night, Diana lies awake long after Luis's breathing has evened into sleep. Her new phone burns like a coal in its hiding place, filled with messages from friends offering support, resources, hope. She thinks about her afternoon shifts at the cafe, about Carla's knowing looks and gentle questions, about the small account growing with each paycheck, her ticket to freedom. But freedom comes with a price. Each step toward independence brings new risks, new confrontations. Luis's suspicion grows like shadows at sunset, creeping longer and darker with each passing day. Diana knows she's walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could send her plummeting into the void. Morning brings no relief. Luis hovers in the kitchen longer than usual, watching Diana prepare his coffee with an intensity that makes her skin crawl. His comments grow sharper, more pointed. "You've lost weight," he observes over breakfast, his tone accusatory. "Are you eating properly?" Diana adds exactly one sugar cube to his coffee. "Of course, I've just been busy with..." "With what?" Luis cuts her off. "What could possibly keep you so busy that you're neglecting yourself, that you're becoming secretive?" "I'm not being secretive." Diana sets his coffee before him, careful not to let her hand shake. You just what?" Luis's voice drops to that dangerous whisper she knows too well. "You just thought you could start making decisions without consulting me? Start keeping secrets?" Diana feels the familiar urge to apologize, to make herself smaller, to do anything to diffuse his anger. But something stops her. Perhaps the weight of her new phone in her pocket, or the memory of Carla's encouraging smile, or the thought of her grandmother's strength flowing through her veins. "I'm tired," she says instead, her voice quiet but steady. "That's all." Luis stares at her for a long moment before rising from the table. "We'll discuss this later. I have a meeting." After he leaves, Diana sinks into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. The morning sun catches on her grandmother's clock, its pendulum still marking time with relentless precision. Each swing feels like a countdown now, to discovery, to confrontation, to whatever comes next. She pulls out her new phone, fingers hovering over Carla's number. One call could set everything in motion. The plans they've discussed in whispered conversations between customers, the resources Carla knows about, the path to freedom that seems both impossible and inevitable. But not yet. Diana slides the phone back into her pocket. She needs more time, more preparation. The house sale looms like a storm on the horizon, threatening to sweep away everything before she's ready. She needs to move faster, be smarter, stay one step ahead of Luis's growing suspicion. Outside, Mrs. Rodriguez tends her roses, unaware of the drama unfolding behind Diana's carefully maintained facade. The flowers bob in the morning breeze, their faces turned toward the sun, seeking light just as Diana seeks her own path forward. Diana rises from the table, squaring her shoulders. She has a shift at the cafe this afternoon. If Luis thinks he can stop her by canceling her church meetings, he'll soon learn otherwise. Each small act of defiance strengthens her resolve, building like waves against a crumbling seawall. She moves through her morning routine with mechanical precision, but her mind races ahead, planning, calculating, preparing. The time for hesitation is over. Luis's suspicions have forced her hand, and now she must act before he can tighten his grip further. The house feels different now, its familiar corners holding new shadows. Diana touches the walls as she passes, remembering her grandmother's words about keeping its stories safe. But sometimes she realizes keeping stories safe means knowing when to let them go, when to write new ones. Her phone buzzes softly, a message from Carla about today's shift. Diana reads it quickly, then deletes it, erasing all traces of her secret life. She's becoming an expert at this dance of deception, each step carefully measured, each movement precisely timed. But as she looks up at her grandmother's clock, its brass pendulum still marking time with unwavering certainty, Diana knows that some things can't be measured or controlled. Change is coming, ready or not, and all she can do is gather her strength and face it head on. The morning light streams through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Diana watches them stretch and shift, thinking about how shadows can make familiar things look strange and threatening. But shadows also mean there's light somewhere, breaking through the darkness. She touches her grandmother's ring, still hanging on its chain beneath her blouse. Its weight against her skin reminds her of who she is, who she comes from, and who she might yet become. The time for being afraid is over. Diana straightens her shoulders and begins preparing for her afternoon shift. Let Luis suspect. Let him question. She's done being the perfect, submissive wife who never steps out of line. The woman who enters Cafe Rosa each afternoon, who learns to make lattes and connect with customers, who saves every dollar and plans her escape. That's the real Diana, emerging from decades of silence like a butterfly from its chrysalis. The clock chimes 10, its sound echoing through the quiet house. Diana looks up at the face that has witnessed so many moments of her life. Time is moving forward, and for once, she's moving with it instead of standing still. Outside, the world continues its daily dance. Mrs. Rodriguez with her roses, the mail carrier making his rounds, cars passing on their way to somewhere else. Diana watches through the window, feeling both apart from and part of this normal flow of life. Soon she'll join that flow again, stepping back into the world not as Luis's wife, but as herself. For now, though, she continues her careful preparation, knowing that each small step brings her closer to freedom. The morning light catches on her grandmother's clock one last time, its brass pendulum still swinging, still counting down to whatever comes next. Diana takes a deep breath and begins to gather her things for work. The time for fear is over. Now is the time for action. The real estate agent's business card feels like it's burning a hole in Diana's purse as she sits in the quiet corner of the public library, away from prying eyes. Marta Rodriguez, no relation to her neighbor, had been recommended by one of the regulars at Cafe Rosa. She's handled difficult situations before, Carla had whispered during a quiet moment between customers. She'll understand. Diana's fingers shake as she dials the number on her secret phone. Each ring echoes in her ear like a warning bell. Marta Rodriguez speaking. Hi, I'm calling about selling a house. Diana's voice sounds small, even to her own ears. It's complicated. Complicated how? Marta's voice is professional but kind. Diana takes a deep breath. The house is in my name, inherited from my grandmother, but my husband, he doesn't know I'm planning to sell it. A pause. I see. Something in Marta's tone tells Diana she understands far more than those two words convey. Why don't you come to my office? We can discuss your options. The meeting with Marta leaves Diana's head spinning with terms like sole ownership and independent sale and separate property. The possibilities spread before her like paths in a maze, each one leading to potential freedom or disaster. The paperwork alone seems overwhelming. Signatures needed, Documents to be filed, timing to be considered. The market's good right now, Marta explains, spreading papers across her desk. We could list it quickly, have everything ready within weeks. Weeks. The word hits Diana like a physical blow. In just weeks, she could be free of this house, this marriage, this life that's slowly suffocating her. But the thought of leaving makes her chest tight with grief. That evening, Diana walks through her grandmother's house. Her house, touching familiar walls, tracing the patterns in the old wallpaper. Each room holds memories. Her grandmother teaching her to make tortillas in the kitchen, Sunday dinners with cousins crowded around the dining room table, quiet afternoons reading in the window seat while rain tapped against the glass. She pauses in front of the hall mirror, the one that's hung there since before she was born. Her reflection stares back, and for a moment, she sees her grandmother's face overlaid with her own, the same determined set of the jaw, the same quiet strength in the eyes. Keep its stories safe, her grandmother had said. But what about Diana's own story? What about the chapters yet to be written? Footsteps on the porch startle her from her reverie. Luis home early. Diana hurries to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She can hear him in the entryway, his movements sharp with the anger he's been carrying lately. Diana! His voice cracks through the house like a whip. She forces her hands to stay steady as she reaches for a glass, pretending she's just getting water. In the kitchen. Luis appears in the doorway, his face dark with rage. In his hand, he holds a piece of paper. Diana's blood runs cold, a printout of real estate listings in the area. She'd forgotten to clear her browser history on the family computer. What is this? He slaps the paper down on the counter. Why are you looking at house prices? I was just curious about the neighborhood. The lie tastes like ashes in her mouth. Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned her son might be selling. Don't lie to me. Luis's fist comes down hard on the counter, making the glass jump. You've been acting strange for weeks, disappearing for hours, making secret phone calls. Now this. Diana backs away, putting the kitchen island between them. Luis, you're overreacting. Overreacting? He laughs, a harsh sound that makes her flinch. My wife is sneaking around behind my back, and I'm overreacting? I'm not sneaking. Shut up, Luis advances around the island. You think I don't know what you're planning? You think you can just sell this house out from under me? Diana's back hits the refrigerator. The fear is familiar. It's been her companion for years, but now there's something else too. Anger, determination, strength she didn't know she had. The house is mine. Her voice comes out stronger than she expected. My grandmother left it to me. Luis's face twists with fury. Nothing is yours. Everything we have is because of me. You're nothing without me, Diana. Nothing. Later that night, Diana lies in bed listening to Luis's heavy breathing beside her. Her body aches from tension, from holding herself still and small. Through the window, moonlight silvers the branches of her grandmother's old oak tree, casting shadowed patterns on the ceiling. On the nightstand, Luis's phone buzzes with an incoming call. Diana holds her breath, but he doesn't stir. The name on the screen makes her heart stop. Emilia. This late at night, she strains to hear the message Emilia leaves, Luis's sister's voice carrying faintly through the speaker. Got the paperwork ready. Meeting with the buyers tomorrow. Need to move fast before she figures it out. Diana's hand clenches in the sheets. They're already making plans, already plotting to take her home. Time is running out. In the darkness, Diana makes her decision. Tomorrow she'll call Marta. No more hesitation, no more fear. Let Luis rage. Let Emilia plot. This is her house, her life, her story to write. The moon catches on her grandmother's ring, still hanging from its chain around her neck. Diana touches it gently, drawing strength from its familiar contours. Tomorrow will bring its own battles, but tonight, in this quiet moment between one life and another, she allows herself to feel the full weight of what she's about to do. Outside, the oak tree's leaves whisper in the night breeze, telling stories of women who came before, who faced their own battles, who found their own strength. Diana listens to their rustling voice, lets it mix with her grandmother's remembered words. Keep its stories safe. She will keep the stories safe. All of them, even the hard ones, even the ones still being written. But first she has to survive this chapter, has to find her way through this dark night into whatever light waits on the other side. Diana closes her eyes, her grandmother's ring warm against her skin. In a few hours, the sun will rise, bringing with it new challenges, new confrontations, new chances to be brave. For now, though, she lets herself rest, gathering strength for the battles ahead. The house settles around her with familiar creaks and sighs as if it too is preparing for what's to come. In the morning, everything will change. But for this moment, in the quiet dark of night, Diana holds on to her resolve, lets it fill her like light filling a room. Tomorrow she fights back. Diana's hands tremble as she sets Luis's dinner plate before him, the ceramic making a soft click against the worn tablecloth. The kitchen feels smaller tonight, the walls pressing in with each measured breath she takes. Luis hasn't spoken since he came home, but his silence carries more weight than words, a pressure building like storm clouds on the horizon. "Sit down," he says finally, not looking up from his phone. His voice is quiet, controlled, but Diana recognizes the undercurrent of something darker. She's learned to read these subtle shifts in his mood like a sailor reads the weather, survival, depending on accurate interpretation. She lowers herself into the chair across from him, hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. The dining room clock ticks steadily, marking each moment of silence between them. Outside, a car passes, its headlights sweeping across the walls like searching fingers. Luis sets his phone down with deliberate care. "You know, Diana," he begins, leaning forward slightly, "I've been thinking about our conversation regarding the house." His eyes are cold, calculating as they fix on her face. "You're not getting any younger." The words land like stones in still water, ripples of anxiety spreading through her chest. She forces herself to meet his gaze, though every instinct screams to look away. "What do you think you're going to do?" he continues, his tone dripping with condescension. "Start over? At your age?" A small, cruel smile plays at the corners of his mouth. "No one will take you seriously. You'll be alone, like you've always been." Each word strikes with surgical precision, finding the tender places in her armor that years of marriage have exposed. Diana's throat tightens, but she manages to keep her expression neutral, a skill honed through decades of practice. "That little job at the community center?" That's Luis scoffs, cutting into his chicken with mechanical precision. "What is it? 10 hours a week? 12? It's insignificant, Diana, like playing at Independence." He takes a bite, chews thoughtfully. "You can't live without me. You know that, don't you?" The doubt seeps in like cold water under a door, pooling in the corners of her mind where certainty once stood. Diana stares at her untouched plate, watching steam rise from the food she no longer has any appetite to eat. Her previous resolve, the fierce determination to leave, to reclaim her life, begins to waver under the weight of his words. "I take care of you," Luis continues, his voice softening into something almost paternal. "I always have. Who else would want that responsibility?" He reaches across the table, touching her hand with fingers that feel like ice. "You're being unrealistic, mi amor. Foolish." Diana pulls her hand back slowly, tucking it beneath the table. Her grandmother's ring presses against her chest where it hangs on its chain, a small point of warmth in the growing cold. But even that comfort feels distant now, overshadowed by the creeping fear that Luis might be right. Later, after Luis retreats to his study, Diana moves through the house like a ghost, touching familiar surfaces with numb fingers. Each room holds memories that once gave her strength. Her grandmother teaching her to make tortillas in the kitchen, Sunday afternoons reading in the living room, quiet moments in the garden where she felt most herself. Now these same memories seem to mock her, reminding her of all she stands to lose. She pauses by the window in the living room, staring out at the darkened street. Her reflection stares back, superimposed over the neighborhood she's known all her life. The lines around her eyes seem deeper tonight, the silver in her hair more prominent. 53 years old. Too old to start over, as Luis said, too set in her ways to forge a new path. The house creaks and settles around her, its familiar sounds now feeling less like comfort and more like chains. She thinks of the small apartment she looked at last week, its clean, empty rooms promising a fresh start. But now that possibility seems to recede like the tide, leaving her stranded in the certainty of her current life. Diana sinks into her grandmother's old armchair, its worn fabric holding her like an embrace. The weight of indecision presses down on her chest, making each breath a conscious effort. She's too old, too dependent, too afraid. Luisa's words echo in her mind, each repetition eroding her confidence like waves against a shoreline. The clock strikes 9, its chimes rolling through the quiet house. Diana closes her eyes, feeling the tears she won't allow to fall burning behind her eyelids. The thought of losing everything, the house, her security, the life she's known for so long, paralyzes her. For a moment, she can't remember why she thought she could do this, why she believed she was strong enough to start over. In the study, Luis's chair scrapes against the floor as he stands. Diana tenses automatically at the sound, her body responding to years of conditioning. The paralysis deepens, rooting her to the spot as his footsteps move through the house, marking his territory with each deliberate step. She remains motionless until long after he's gone upstairs, still sitting in her grandmother's chair as the night deepens around her. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now seems to close in, its walls holding her in an embrace that feels more like a prison with each passing moment. Diana stares into the darkness, completely still except for the trembling of her hands, wondering if this is all there ever will be. Morning brings no clarity, only a bone-deep weariness that makes even the simplest tasks feel monumental. Diana moves through her routine like a sleepwalker, Luis's words echoing in her mind with each passing hour. By afternoon, the silence of the house becomes unbearable, each tick of the kitchen clock a reminder of time slipping away. Without conscious decision, she finds herself reaching for her car keys, seeking escape in the one place where she still feels like herself. The community center's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the empty hallway as Diana makes her way to the break room. Her footsteps echo against the linoleum, each step feeling heavier than the last. She hadn't planned to come in today. Her shift isn't until tomorrow, but the walls of her house had started closing in, Luis's words still ringing in her ears. Carla is already there, organizing donated clothing into neat piles on the break room table. She looks up as Diana enters, her practiced smile faltering when she sees Diana's face. ¿Qué pasó? She asks softly, abandoning the clothes to pull out a chair. Sit, I'll make coffee. Diana sinks into the offered chair, watching Carla move efficiently around the small kitchenette. The familiar smell of coffee fills the room, grounding her in the present moment. Here, away from the suffocating atmosphere of her home, she can almost breathe again. Luis? Diana begins, then stops, the words sticking in her throat. How to explain the weight of years, the slow erosion of self that happens so gradually you don't notice until you're almost gone? Her hands curl around the warm mug Carla places before her. He says I'm too old to start over, that no one will take me seriously. Carla's face softens with understanding. She pulls her chair close enough that Diana can smell her familiar lavender perfume. Mi amiga, she says gently, do you know how many women I've heard say those exact words? Diana looks up sharply, surprised. Carla nods, her eyes holding a deeper knowledge than Diana has noticed before. Every week, women come through those doors, Carla continues, gesturing toward the hallway. Some younger, some older than you. All of them thinking they're trapped, that it's too late, that they have no choice but to stay. She reaches across the table, covering Diana's hand with her own. And do you know what happens to these women? Diana shakes her head, transfixed by the quiet intensity in Carla's voice. They leave anyway. They start over. They build new lives, find new strength. Carla's grip tightens slightly. Age doesn't matter, Diana. What matters is that you're alive, that you have the right to live your life on your terms. Something shifts in Diana's chest, a small crack appearing in the wall of doubt Luis had built. But how? She whispers. The house, the money, everything. Remember Maria Gonzalez? Carla asks. She left her husband at 62, started a catering business from her tiny apartment kitchen. Now she has her own restaurant. She leans back, studying Diana's face. And Carmen Ruiz? Left with nothing but a suitcase at 58. Today she runs our domestic violence support group. Each name lands like a stone in still water, rippling outward, disturbing the stagnant pool of Diana's fears. She thinks of these women she's seen at church, at the market, walking with their heads held high. Women she never knew carried stories so similar to her own. The hardest part, Carla says softly, is believing you deserve more. That you have the power to change things. It's not too late, Diana. It's never too late. Diana stares into her coffee cup, watching her reflection waver on its surface. She sees herself as she's been. Small, afraid, diminished by years of Luis's careful manipulation. But now, like a photograph coming into focus, she begins to see something else. The strength that has always been there, waiting. There's a whole community here, Carla continues, her voice gentle but firm. Women who understand, who have walked this path before you. You're not alone in this, Diana. You never were. The words sink deep, finding purchase in soil that Luis's cruelty had tried to poison. Diana feels something unfurling in her chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but possibility. The possibility that Luis might be wrong, that she might be stronger than she thought. When she finally looks up, Carla is watching her with knowing eyes. You already have everything you need, she says quietly. The strength, the courage, it's all there. You just have to choose to use it. Diana's hand goes to her grandmother's ring, hanging beneath her blouse. She thinks of all the women who have worn it before her, who faced their own battles, made their own choices. Women who refuse to be diminished. Standing abruptly, Diana pushes back from the table. Her legs feel steady beneath her, stronger than they felt in days. I need to go, she says, her voice clear and certain. There's something I have to do. Carla nods, understanding lighting her eyes. Remember what I said, she calls as Diana reaches the door. You're not alone. Diana pauses, one hand on the doorframe. Thank you, she says softly, the words carrying the weight of years, of understanding, of solidarity found in unexpected places. The drive home passes in a blur of determination. Diana's mind is clear, focused, as she pulls into the driveway. Luis's car is already there, but for once, the sight doesn't fill her with dread. Instead, she feels a calm certainty settling over her like armor. She finds him in the living room, newspaper spread across his lap, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looks up as she enters, his expression already darkening at whatever he sees in her face. I'm selling the house, Luis. The words come out steady, strong. I've made my decision. It's time for me to move on. Luis's face contorts with rage as he surges to his feet, the newspaper falling forgotten to the floor. What did you say? His voice is dangerous, low. This house is mine, Diana continues, her voice never wavering. I'm not going to let you give it to Amelia. I'm not going to let you control me anymore. How dare you? Luis takes a step toward her, his hands clenched into fists. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. But Diana doesn't flinch. She thinks of Carla's words, of Maria Gonzalez and Carmen Ruiz, of all the women who found their voice, their strength, their freedom. She thinks of her grandmother who left this house not as a prison, but as a legacy of independence. It's my decision, she says simply. I've been silent for too long, but I won't let you control me anymore. Luis's face twists with fury. He opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again, but for once, no words come out. He stares at her as if seeing a stranger, someone he doesn't recognize, can't control. Diana watches him storm out, listens to his heavy footsteps on the stairs, the slam of his study door. Her heart is pounding, but not with fear. For the first time in years, she feels truly awake, truly present in her own life. The house settles around her, creaking and sighing as it always has. But now its sounds feel different, not like chains, but like applause, like approval, like freedom. Diana's hands tremble as she signs her name on Marta Castillo's real estate contract, the cursive letters wobbling slightly on the dotted line. The realtor's office smells of coffee and fresh paper, worlds away from the stale air of her kitchen at home. Marta, an old friend from her church days, watches with understanding in her dark eyes. Are you sure about this, Diana? Marta's voice is gentle, but professional. She's handled enough sensitive sales to know when to keep her distance. Diana sets down the pen, straightening her spine. Yes. The word comes out stronger than she expected. She thinks of Luis at home, probably reviewing his morning paper, unaware that his wife is dismantling their life piece by piece. Marta gathers the papers with practiced efficiency, her silver bracelet catching the morning light. I'll start scheduling viewings right away. We'll need to be discreet. Very discreet. Diana interrupts, her voice barely above a whisper. She twists her wedding ring, a nervous habit she's developed over the years. Luis can't know. Not yet. Of course. Marta's eyes flick to Diana's ring, then away. I'll schedule viewings when he's at work. We'll say it's routine maintenance if anyone asks. Diana nods, relief flooding through her. This is really happening. After weeks of careful planning, of rehearsing this moment in her mind, she's finally taking the first step. The house, her grandmother's house, will soon belong to someone else. The thought brings both pain and a strange sort of freedom. The next few days pass in a blur of preparation. Diana arranges for small repairs that won't attract attention. A loose shingle here, a squeaky floorboard there. She tells Luis it's just routine maintenance, and he barely looks up from his phone. His disinterest, once a source of hurt, now works in her favor. Prospective buyers begin to trickle through the house while Luis is at work. Diana watches their faces as they admire the crown molding, peer into closets, test the water pressure. Each viewing feels like a betrayal of her grandmother's memory, but also like a step towards salvation. One couple lingers in the kitchen, admiring the vintage tiles her grandmother had insisted on keeping. Such character, the woman says, running her hand along the counter. You don't see craftsmanship like this anymore. Diana's throat tightens. She remembers standing at this counter as a child, watching her grandmother roll out tortillas, the clay tiles cool under her bare feet. But she can't keep living in memories, not when the present threatens to suffocate her. The search for a new home proves more challenging than Diana anticipated. She visits apartments during her lunch breaks, making excuses to Luis about running errands or meeting friends. Each empty space represents possibility and terror. After 30 years of marriage, the thought of living alone sends chills down her spine. But then she finds it, a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex near the community center. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, shows her around with quiet efficiency. The space is small but bright, with large windows that flood the rooms with natural light. Unlike the heavy, masculine furniture Luis favors, everything here feels light, airy, possible. It's perfect, Diana whispers, standing in the empty living room. She can already see where she'll put her grandmother's reading chair, the few precious items she plans to take with her. Mrs. Chen hands her the keys with a knowing look. Sometimes we need a fresh start, she says simply, and Diana wonders how many women like her have stood in this room, keys in hand, tasting freedom for the first time. The community center becomes her sanctuary in these uncertain days. Diana volunteers there 3 afternoons a week, telling Luis she's helping with a church project. The women she meets there share stories that mirror her own. The slow erosion of self-worth, the careful monitoring of words and actions, the constant fear of setting off their partner's temper. In the support group, Diana listens more than she speaks. These women's stories pour out like water from a broken dam, tales of control, manipulation, and sometimes violence. She recognizes herself in their nervous laughter, their careful way of watching doors, their tendency to minimize their own pain. It took me 3 tries to leave, one woman confesses during a session. Her hands shake as she speaks, but her voice is steady. Each time I went back thinking it would be different, until I realized nothing would change unless I changed it. Diana absorbs these words like rainfall on parched earth. Each story strengthens her resolve, reminds her why she's doing this. She's not alone anymore. These women understand what it means to rebuild a life from scratch, to choose yourself when the world tells you to stay small and quiet. But then the careful scaffolding of her plans begins to crumble. She comes home one evening to find Luis's car in the driveway hours before he usually returns. Her heart stutters in her chest as she turns her key in the lock. The house feels different somehow, the air thick with tension. Luis stands in the living room, a stack of papers clutched in his hand, real estate documents. Diana's blood turns to ice as she recognizes Marta's letterhead. What is this? His voice is deadly quiet, controlled in that way that always precedes his worst moments. What the hell do you think you're doing? Diana's hand finds the doorframe, steadying herself. All her carefully rehearsed explanations desert her in this moment. Luis? You what? He slams the papers down on the coffee table, making her flinch. You thought you could sell our house behind my back? Make arrangements without consulting me? His voice rises with each question, filling the room with his rage. It's my house. The words come out before she can stop them, small but clear. My grandmother left it to me. Luis's laugh is ugly, devoid of humor. Your house? Nothing here is yours, Diana. Everything we have, everything you are, It's because of me. He steps closer, his presence filling her vision. You think you can just walk away? Start over at your age? Diana forces herself to meet his gaze, though every instinct screams at her to look away. Yes, she says, and the single word feels like a declaration of war. His hand shoots out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. You're not going anywhere. His voice drops to a whisper, hot against her ear. If you try this again, if you so much as think about leaving, you'll regret it. Do you understand me? Diana doesn't answer, can't answer. Her arm throbs where he grips it, but the pain feels distant, unreal. She's watching the scene from somewhere else, somewhere high above her body, where Luis can't reach her. He releases her with a shove that sends her stumbling back against the wall. I'll deal with this mess you've created, he says, gathering the papers, and then we're going to have a long talk about respect and gratitude. The threat in his voice is unmistakable. Diana watches him stride to his study, her arm burning where he grabbed her. She knows with sudden crystal clarity that she can't stay here another night. The careful timeline she'd planned, weeks of preparation, a gradual transition, has just collapsed into hours. The next few days pass in a haze of tension and barely contained violence. Luis's rage simmers just below the surface, erupting in small ways. A coffee cup hurled at the wall, a door slammed so hard the pictures rattle, cruel words delivered in that soft, dangerous voice he saves for his worst moments. He starts showing up at the community center, watching from his car as Diana leaves her volunteer shifts. The message is clear. She is being monitored, controlled, owned. The other volunteers notice, offering to walk her to her car, to call the police. Diana declines with a tight smile. She can't risk confrontation. Not yet. Not until she's ready. At home, Luis's presence fills every room like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. He makes phone calls in his study, speaking too quietly for Diana to hear, but she catches phrases that make her blood run cold. Handle it quietly and teach her a lesson. The final straw comes on a Tuesday evening. Diana is preparing dinner, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision when Luis enters the kitchen. He stands too close, watching her hands on the knife. You know what happens to women who try to leave their husbands? His voice is conversational, almost friendly. Bad things, Diana. Accidents happen all the time. The knife trembles in Diana's hand. She sets it down carefully, turning to face him. Something in her expression must surprise him because he steps back, just slightly. I know exactly what happens to women like me, she says, and her voice doesn't shake at all. That's why I'm leaving. She doesn't wait for his response. She walks past him, up the stairs to their bedroom. Her suitcase is already packed, hidden in the back of her closet behind winter coats Luis never notices. She's been preparing for this moment for weeks, squirreling away essentials, important documents, the few precious items she can't bear to leave behind. Diana moves through the house like a ghost, gathering the last few items she'll need, her grandmother's ring on its chain, the small photo album from before her marriage, her mother's recipe box. Each item feels like a talisman carrying the strength of the women who came before her. Luis watches from the doorway, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You won't make it a week on your own, he says, but there's something new in his voice. Fear, perhaps. Recognition that he's losing control. Diana doesn't respond. She walks past him, suitcase in hand, down the stairs she's climbed thousands of times. Each step feels like crossing a boundary, moving from one life into another. At the front door, she pauses. The house seems to hold its breath around her, waiting. This place that has been both sanctuary and prison, keeper of her history and witness to her pain. She touches the doorframe one last time, a goodbye to the generations of women who lived here before her. Diana. Luis's voice carries down the stairs, a command and a plea. Don't do this. She opens the door and steps through, closing it firmly behind her. The night air hits her face like a blessing, cool and clean. Her car, the one she bought secretly last month, waits in the driveway, packed with the pieces of her new life. The drive to her apartment feels surreal, like moving through a dream. Streetlights blur past her window, each one carrying her further from the life she's known, closer to the one she's chosen. Her hands are steady on the wheel, even as tears blur her vision. The apartment is exactly as she left it this morning when she came to drop off another load of belongings. The space feels different now, more real. This is home now. These bare walls, this empty kitchen, this small bedroom with its single window, this is where she'll rebuild herself. Diana unpacks slowly, deliberately. Each item she places feels like a declaration. I am here. I am free. I exist without him. Her grandmother's reading chair fits perfectly in the corner by the window. The recipe box finds its place on the kitchen counter. Her clothes hang in the closet, no longer crowded to one side by Luis's suits. Outside, the city continues its nighttime rhythm. Cars pass on the street below, people walking dogs, living their lives. Diana stands at her window, watching this new world unfold. The fear is still there, humming beneath her skin. Fear of Luis's retaliation, fear of failure, fear of this vast unknown stretching before her. But there's something else too, something growing stronger with each breath. Pride, determination, hope. She thinks of the women at the community center, their stories of survival and renewal. She thinks of her grandmother, who built a life from nothing after her own husband died, who left Diana this house as a reminder of her own strength. Diana touches the window glass, cool beneath her fingers. Her reflection looks back at her, overlaid against the city lights, a woman she barely recognizes, stronger than she ever knew she could be. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, lawyers to call, accounts to separate, a life to untangle from Luis's web of control. But tonight, in this moment, Diana allows herself to feel the full weight of what she's done. She's left. She's free. She's chosen herself. The night stretches out before her, full of possibility and terror and hope. Diana moves away from the window, begins the familiar routine of preparing for bed in this unfamiliar space. Each action feels new, significant. Hanging her towel on the rack, arranging her pillows, setting her alarm. In the quiet of her new bedroom, Diana lies awake, listening to the strange sounds of this building, this neighborhood, this life. Her phone buzzes periodically, Luis probably, alternating between threats and pleas. She'll deal with that tomorrow, change her number, take the next necessary steps. For now, she focuses on her breathing, on the feeling of being alone in this space that belongs only to her. The fear is still there, but it no longer owns her. She's chosen a different path, one that leads away from Luis's control and towards something new, something entirely her own. Outside her window, the moon rises over the city, casting silver light across her bed. Diana watches it climb higher, remembering all the nights she lay awake in her grandmother's house, dreaming of escape. Now she's here, in this small apartment that represents both exile and freedom. She thinks of the house she's left behind, the one that held 4 generations of strong women. Maybe she hasn't lost it after all. Maybe she's carried its strength with her, in her bones, in her blood, in her unwavering decision to save herself. Diana closes her eyes, letting the moonlight wash over her. Tomorrow will bring its own battles, but tonight she rests in the knowledge that she is exactly where she needs to be, in this empty apartment, in this new life, finally, irrevocably free. Diana stands in her grandmother's kitchen for the last time, moonlight filtering through the windows she's cleaned 1,000 times before. The house feels different tonight, emptier, as if it already knows she's leaving. Her fingers trace the familiar crack in the counter's edge, memorizing its shape one final time. The cardboard box before her holds 53 years of life, distilled into what matters most. The silver-framed photo of her grandmother on her wedding days, the recipe box filled with handwritten cards yellowed by time, the small clay pot she made in 3rd grade that her grandmother kept all these years. Diana lifts each item carefully, wrapping them in newspaper with trembling hands. In the living room, the walls are bare where family photos once hung, leaving lighter rectangles on the faded wallpaper. Diana remembers each picture's placement, her parents' wedding photo by the window, her own quinceañera portrait above the sofa, the 4 generations of women captured at her grandmother's 80th birthday. She'd taken them down one by one last week, each removal another step toward freedom. Her suitcase waits by the door, packed with the essentials she'll need for her new life. The rest of her belongings were moved gradually over the past month to her small apartment across town. A few items each day, nothing noticeable enough to raise Luis's suspicions. The thought of him makes her hands still momentarily on the dish towel she's folding. Tomorrow, when he discovers she's gone, there will be rage. But for the first time in decades, Diana won't be here to weather it. Moving through the rooms, Diana catalogs the memories embedded in every corner. Here, the window seat where her grandmother taught her to embroider. There, the dining room table where 3 generations of women rolled tamales every Christmas. Each space holds echoes of laughter, tears, whispered confidences, the full measure of a life lived in these walls. In her bedroom, no, their bedroom, Diana opens the closet one last time. Her side is nearly empty now, just a few hangers bearing the clothes Luis expects to see. His suits hang pristine and pressed on the other side, taking up most of the space. Even his clothes dominate hers. Diana closes the door firmly, turning away from this small symbol of their unbalanced marriage. The moon has risen higher now, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Diana moves through the house like a ghost, touching familiar surfaces one last time. The banister her grandmother polished every Sunday, the door frame marked with generations of children's heights, the window latch that always stuck in humid weather. Each touch is a goodbye, each step another thread of connection severed. In the study, Diana pulls out fresh paper and a pen. The letter she must write weighs heavy on her heart, but the words have been forming for years. They flow now, steady and sure. Luis and Amelia, by the time you read this, I will be gone. The house has been sold. Legally, rightfully sold, as it was always mine to sell. I know this will anger you, Luis. You've spent years making me believe I had no power, no rights, no choice. But my grandmother left this house to me, and in doing so, she left me a final gift, the means to save myself. I've endured your control, your manipulation, your slow erosion of my sense of self. Each day I became smaller, quieter, more afraid, but I am my grandmother's granddaughter, and her strength runs in my blood. I am reclaiming my life, my voice, my power. Do not try to find me. Do not try to control this last decision of mine. It's done. Diana. She folds the letter carefully, running her finger along the crease to make it sharp and clean. The envelope sits stark white against the dark wood of the kitchen counter where she places it. Luis will find it in the morning when he comes down for his coffee. Coffee she won't be here to make. Dawn is still hours away when Diana makes one final circuit of the house. Each room feels both familiar and strange, like a photograph negative of the home she's known. The furniture that remains, Luis's heavy mahogany desk, the dining room set he inherited from his mother, the leather armchair he claimed as his territory, seems to watch her accusingly. Let them watch. They're his now, these symbols of his authority, these markers of her submission. Outside, the night air carries the scent of Mrs. Rodriguez's roses. Diana thinks of all the mornings she watched her neighbor tend her garden, longing for the freedom to join her. Perhaps in her new life, she'll plant roses of her own. The bank opens at 9, but Diana arrives at 8:45, her hands steady on the steering wheel despite the sleepless night. She's chosen her outfit carefully, the gray suit she bought secretly last month, a silk blouse in deep blue that makes her feel strong, professional, capable, not the meek housewife Luis shaped her to be. The loan officer, Miss Chen, greets her with a warm smile. Good morning, Mrs. Torres. I have all the paperwork ready for your signature. Diana settles into the chair, accepting the heavy sheaf of documents. Each page represents another step toward freedom, another lock broken, another chain shed. She reads carefully. Luis taught her that much at least, never to sign anything without reading it fully. But these papers are exactly what they should be. The sale of her grandmother's house, the transfer of funds to her new account, the legal severing of this last tie to her old life. The pen feels weighty in her hand as she signs her name again and again. Diana Torres, not Luis's wife, not the quiet woman who lived in her grandmother's house, but Diana Torres, choosing her own path at last. Ms. Chen collects the signed papers, her movements efficient and professional. Congratulations, Mrs. Torres. The sale is complete. The funds will be transferred to your account by end of business today. Diana nods, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She accepts her copies of the documents, sliding them carefully into her leather portfolio. Another recent purchase, another small act of independence. The drive from the bank to her grandmother's house, no, not hers anymore, takes 12 minutes. Diana knows because she's timed this route repeatedly over the past weeks, planning her escape down to the minute. Luis will be at work until 6. Amelia has her standing hair appointment on Thursdays. The house will be empty, waiting for her final goodbye. She parks in the driveway one last time, killing the engine. The house looms before her, familiar and foreign all at once. Inside, the morning light paints patterns on the floors she's polished countless times. Diana moves through the rooms with purpose now, checking that everything is in place. Her letter on the counter, her keys on the hook by the door, her past arranged just so for Luis to find. The suitcase feels lighter than it should, given that it contains the remnants of her life here. Diana wheels it to her car, the sound of its wheels on the concrete oddly final. She opens the trunk, lifting the suitcase with care. It holds not just clothes and photographs, but the courage of generations of women who came before her. Standing in the driveway, Diana allows herself one last look at the house. Memories flood her mind. Her grandmother's laugh echoing through the halls, the smell of fresh bread on Sunday mornings, the quiet moments when she could just be herself. But mixed with these are darker memories. Luis's anger filling every room, his control tightening like a noose, the slow death of her spirit under his dominance. "Goodbye," she whispers, not to the house itself, but to the woman she was within its walls. That Diana, afraid, submissive, slowly fading, stays behind with the empty rooms and the echoes of her past. The drive to her new apartment takes 23 minutes. Diana counts each one, feeling the distance grow between her old life and her new one. With each mile, her breathing comes easier, her shoulders relax incrementally, her grip on the steering wheel loosens. She thinks about the years that led to this moment. The first time Luis raised his voice to her, how she told herself it was stress from work. The way he gradually took control of their finances, claiming she wasn't good with money. How he isolated her from friends and family, one relationship at a time, until her world shrank to just him and Amelia. The constant criticism that eroded her confidence, the subtle threats that kept her in line, the manipulation that made her doubt her own mind. But she also thinks about the moments of clarity that brought her here. The day she found her grandmother's will in Luis's study, proving the house was legally hers. The afternoon at the community center, when she first spoke her truth aloud to another woman who understood. The quiet mornings when she planned her escape, reclaiming her power one small decision at a time. The apartment building comes into view, a modest complex with well-tended flower beds and a small courtyard. Diana parks in her assigned spot, number 247. Her spot, chosen by her, paid for with her own money. She lifts her suitcase from the trunk, carrying the box of precious memories in her other arm. The key to her apartment fits smoothly in the lock. Inside, morning light fills the small space she's been quietly furnishing over the past month. A comfortable armchair by the window, picked because she loved it, not because it matched Luis's taste. Curtains in soft blue that remind her of the ocean. A small desk where she can write, dream, plan her future. Diana sets down her burdens, physical and emotional. This space, though modest, holds no memories of fear, no echoes of angry words, no shadows of submission. It is hers alone, and in its simplicity lies more luxury than all the expensive furnishings Luis surrounded her with. She begins to unpack, each item finding its place in her new life. The photo of her grandmother goes on the bedside table, watching over her sleep. The recipe box fits perfectly on the kitchen shelf. The clay pot from 3rd grade becomes a pencil holder on her desk. These pieces of her past, carefully chosen and preserved, will help build her future. Across town, the front door of her grandmother's house opens. Luis steps inside, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. The silence of the house feels wrong. No coffee brewing, no quiet movements in the kitchen, no Diana waiting with his breakfast prepared just so. He sees the envelope first, stark white against the dark counter. His name and Amelia's written in Diana's careful hand. As he reads, his face darkens, fingers tightening on the paper until it crumples at the edges. "Diana!" His voice booms through the empty house, met only by silence. He storms through the rooms, taking in the bare walls, the empty closet, the missing photographs. Each absence is an accusation, each hollow space a testament to his failure to keep her contained. The phone rings 3 times before Amelia answers. "Luis, what's wrong?" "She's gone." His voice shakes with rage. "She sold the house. She left." Silence fills the line as Amelia processes this information. Then, softly, What do you mean she sold the house? She couldn't have. She did. Luisa's fist connects with the kitchen counter. It was hers all along. Her grandmother left it to her, not to us. She played us, Amelia. All this time, while we were making plans, she was making her own. Amelia arrives 20 minutes later, her hair still wet from the salon sink. She stands in the kitchen reading Diana's letter, her perfectly manicured nails trembling slightly. I never thought she'd... Amelia's voice trails off. She always seemed so... weak? Louise spits the word. Compliant? That's what we thought, wasn't it? That she'd just go along with whatever we decided, like she always has. But look around, Amelia. Look what she did while we weren't watching. They stand in the kitchen, brother and sister, surrounded by the evidence of their own blindness. The house feels different now, its familiar spaces transformed by Diana's absence. Every empty shelf, every bare wall, every hollow room testifies to their failure to see her strength, their mistake in underestimating her determination. What do we do now? Amelia asks, but they both know there's nothing to be done. Diana has outmaneuvered them completely, legally and irrevocably. The house is sold, the money beyond their reach, and Diana herself gone to a life they can't touch. 6 months pass, marked not by Luisa's rigid schedules, but by Diana's own rhythms. She volunteers at the community center 3 days a week, sharing her story with other women trapped in situations like hers. Each time she speaks, her voice grows stronger, more certain. You don't have to do it all at once, she tells them, remembering her own careful planning. Take one small step, then another. Build your strength. Find your support. When you're ready, you'll know. The women listen, seeing in her what she once couldn't see in herself. The possibility of change, the promise of freedom, the power of choosing one's own path. Some of them come back week after week, gathering courage from her example. Others disappear, and Diana prays they've found their way to safety, not retreated further into fear. Her apartment has become truly hers now, filled with objects chosen with care and purpose. A small herb garden grows on the windowsill, basil, cilantro, the plants her grandmother taught her to tend. She's painted the walls a soft yellow, the color of morning sun. On weekends, she takes long walks in the park, no longer bound by Luisa's disapproval of wasting time. Diana has learned to measure her life in new ways, not by Luisa's approval or Amelia's judgment, but by her own satisfaction. She's rediscovered old pleasures, reading for hours in her comfortable chair, cooking meals that please her own palate, wearing clothes chosen for comfort rather than Luisa's preferences. She's discovering new ones too, a beginning pottery class, a weekly coffee date with friends from the community center, the simple joy of making decisions without fear. Sometimes she drives past her grandmother's house, sold now to a young family with 2 small children. She sees toys in the yard, bright curtains in the windows, new life breathing through the old rooms. The sight brings not pain, but peace. The house served its purpose, sheltering her until she found her strength, then providing the means for her escape. Diana parks her car in front of her apartment building, grocery bags balanced in her arms. Mrs. Martinez from next door waves from her patio, and Diana stops to chat, no longer worried about being late with Luisa's dinner. Her time is her own now, to spend or save as she chooses. Inside, she puts away her groceries, humming softly to herself. The afternoon sun slants through her windows, catching the silver frame of her grandmother's photo. Diana pauses, touching it gently. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispers to the image. "You knew I'd need a way out someday. Thank you for giving me the means to save myself." The photo seems to smile back at her, the same quiet strength visible in her grandmother's eyes, now reflected in Diana's own. She is no longer the woman who lived in fear, who measured her words carefully, who made herself small to avoid Luisa's anger. She is Diana Torres, her grandmother's granddaughter, standing tall in her own truth, writing her own story. Through her open window, the sounds of the city drift up. Children playing in the courtyard, cars passing, life continuing its steady flow. Diana sits in her comfortable chair, a book open in her lap, at peace with her choices and her future. The sun sets slowly, painting her walls with gold, and Diana Torres, finally and completely herself, smiles at the beauty of it all. Thank you so much for watching and listening to our story. Your time and support mean the world to us. If this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your engagement helps us grow and continue sharing meaningful stories. See you in the next video.